All right, Dalton, we already broke down one defensive tackle duo in college football, which was Notre Dame's Riley Mills and Howard Cross III, which is the second best duo in college football because that number one is by far, in our opinion, Michigan, who has Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham. Grant was our number 4 D tackle in the country. Graham was our number 1 defensive tackle in the country. And honestly, Dalton, looking at this list right now, is this the best duo in college football, period, at a position? I think it might be, right? 2 top 5 players?
At any position. Boy, it's close. Ohio State's running backs are close.
Oh,
That's a close one.
Yeah, that's close. I probably get
Man,
into this, though.
there's probably a set of corners somewhere that I could talk myself into, maybe even at Michigan. But no, it might just be the best in college football. These two guys are freaks, man. Both of them different types of freaks, but they complement each other so well. They're both really good athletes. They're both really sound football players. We've seen already defensive Michigan players are just so fundamentally sound, and they play as a unit, and that's part of what makes them great. But I'll start with Kenneth Grant here,
Yep.
Max, and you've got a guy, huge guy, runs 330, 340 pounds, and just a nightmare for interior offensive linemen. And it's funny because what I was thinking was they played with Chris Jenkins, the last couple years, Chris Jenkins Jr., but Kenneth Grant's actually the one that plays like Chris Jenkins' dad at his size, right? It's kind of the weird part where he's so big and yet he moves so well. Even there was a couple times he dropped into coverage, he's batting passes down. I think I saw a rep or two of both of these guys standing up off the edge. Kenneth Grant just moves different. And to me, the bigger thing really is when he's lined up over the center and he's in the A-gaps. That's when he's at his best, right? He's a nightmare. Third best player in the Power 5 when lined up over the center, rushing the passer. The only 2 guys with a higher pass rush grade in that scenario were Byron Murphy, the best D tackle in the country, and Aeneas Peebles, one of the best pass rushers in the country at any spot. Grant is so big and so strong, and yet his feet move so well at his size. He's such a balanced player. He's not a player that would lead the nation in sacks. There's just not that guy. A number like 5 or 6 sacks would be a good number for him, but he's just one of those big pocket disruptors from the A-gaps who just disturbs quarterbacks, honestly. And both of these guys caused Michael Penix Jr. in the national title game a massive headache, and especially in the early part of that game on early downs. You try to throw on early downs, Kenneth Grant is coming right down the friggin' pipe. He's so... we've had some freaks on this list, and he's as freaky as any of them. And I saw a play against Penn State. Katron Allen broke to the outside off tackle away from Grant, and Grant was pursuing backside, and Allen probably had 3 to 4 yards on him, and Grant ran him down.
Yeah.
At somewhere close to 340 pounds. I didn't know. I saw that play in the Penn State tape, and I was like, what did I just watch? Because this is not both of these guys from Michigan are not normal. They're probably both going to be first-round picks. Grant's got a more debatable case if he just, supercharges the pass rush even more, then he's definitely, a top 20 pick. But, yeah, Grant at his size, it's just not – that's not a normal player. He does not move at a normal speed at that size.
It's so funny that Michigan lost a guy who went in the top 50 of the NFL draft in Chris Jenkins Jr., and they still have by far the best D-tackle duo in the country, man. It really was ridiculous what they had at D-tackle last year at Michigan with Jenkins and Grant and Graham as well. He was the 6th most valuable returning defensive tackle in the Power 5 this past season, even though he was a rotational guy for Michigan on that defensive line. That's how dominant he was when he was on the field, man. He had a 78.4 pass rushing grade, which was top 15 among defensive tackles as well. Now with Chris Jenkins gone and Kenneth Grant is a full-time starter, he is going to be even more of a star, I think, for Michigan's defense next year. And you mentioned it, man, the power with him. Whenever he plays as a zero tech, as a nose tackle for Michigan's defense, he really, really shines. Even had some really good reps against Parker Brailsford, our number 1 center in college football in that national championship game against Washington. And you could just see Brailsford's a really undersized center, but is really good everywhere else, really. You could see that the strength was just too much for him to handle at times from Kenneth Grant. So big fan of Kenneth Grant. I can't wait to see what he does as a full-time starter in 2024. So if Michigan will have 2 first-round picks done in the NFL draft at D-tackle, what does Kenneth Grant need to do in order to get to that range?
I think there are times I see in run defense, there are times when he will play a little bit high. This is something we talked about with Deion Walker as well, because Grant runs at about 6'4", where he's a little bit high, and you can see him kind of get caught on one foot and kind of driven off, especially against double teams. Also, he kind of fights the leverage battle more so in the run game than the pass rush. I really like him as a pass rusher. I think the run game for his size, he could have a little more consistency. I think his balance and his leverage come and go. Like when he plays with leverage and hand usage, monster brick wall in the run game, like no question at all. I just need him to bring it like more often. Like one-on-one, honestly, isn't as bad. Double teams and keeping leverage, because he's a guy at 6'4" and 340. He's gonna get double teamed. Like has to, right? He's just got to stay. He's got to stay in his leverage. He just needs to stay balanced. Like they're just, that's the one thing that sticks out for me. There are times when he gets caught on one foot, and if you lose your feet, you have a real problem. But if he were to bring his run defense grade up to something like, I don't know, let's say like an 85, I think it's an easy first round pick. I really do. I think it's just there's a little more consistency that has to happen. And I do wonder with both of these guys, and we'll get into Graham, about they get rotated in and out so much, and they're in the like low 400s in snap count, where maybe they just have to, like, it's a harder time finding a rhythm sometimes. But that's the only thing I see, is he just has to continue to more consistently play with leverage.
Yeah, that's the big thing for him too. When I was watching him, and I think the Alabama game showed that a lot. And Alabama obviously has a very elite interior offensive line, and he had a 51.5 run defense grade in that game. So I think as a run defender, he's a little average right now, even though he's a really, really big player and a really athletic player as well. He is a little average. I think the leverage, is a big part of that. He sometimes gets washed out in run defense as well. I think there's some more pass rushing moves I want to see from him as well. Right now, he's kind of winning off the explosiveness and off the power he has, which is a really effective way right now. But if he had some moves as well, man, he could be a really, really damn good pass rusher. Right now, I think he's a really, really good pass rusher. I think it could be really, really hard to block if you add some more pass rushing moves. So got to get a little bit better as a run defender, and got to add some more pass rushing moves. But he is still in a very, very good spot, which is why he's our number 4 D tackle in college football heading into next season. But he's not number 1, Dalton. He's not even the best on his own team, because that number 1 is Mason Graham from Michigan, obviously, who was fan-freaking-tastic this past season for Michigan. And honestly, man, he might have won that Alabama game by himself. We mentioned how Grant kind of struggled in that Alabama game. Man, Mason Graham was dominant in that playoff game against Alabama.
He was dominant in both playoff games, and honestly, Michigan got an early lead with their rushing offense in the Washington game, the national title game as well. But as the game wore on, these 2 D tackles, especially Graham, were the story. And sometimes I think what makes Graham so unique is he can just dominate in both facets, right? We've talked in this top 10 list about pass rushers. We've talked about run defenders like a Peter Woods. Mason Graham is elite in both. There is nothing stopping this guy. I can't help but watch him coming into this year and thinking about like Quinnen Williams. Like he's on that level. This is a different level. The amount of polish he already has. There's 3 things to me that stand out with Graham. Lateral quickness, off the charts. Off the absolute charts. He's got the athleticism and the quickness of an edge player. There are reps, Max, of him standing up off of the edge and winning. There's a rep in the national title game against Troy Fautanu where he turns the corner on him from the edge, standing up. This is a defensive tackle with edge athleticism. 2, his motor's off the chain to go with that. Yep. There's no place off ever. And 3, his hand usage, his pass rush moves are as good as any player in the country. Edge, D tackle, linebacker converted, Abdul Carter, whoever you want to put in there. Mason Graham's pass rush arsenal is as good as anybody, combined with the athleticism and the effort. And in the run game, just a monster. I mean, those playoff games, I think, were more impressive in the run game than they were in pass rush. Just, you cannot, with these 2 guys, and especially with Graham, as good a playmaker as he is, you can't run the ball in Michigan, not between the tackles, because these 2 guys are just, they're freaks, both of them. Different types of freaks. Grant at a huge size. Mason Graham, he's like just the prototype. He's everything you want in a 3 technique. Everything. I really think there's a Quinnen Williams type of season coming for him.
If he keeps improving like this, man, I think there's absolutely could be something like that. Because, I mean, as a true freshman, he had an 80.3 PFF grade as a true freshman. And then this past year, he was phenomenal as well. I mean, he was 6th in the nation in pass rush win rate. He was one of only 3 D tackles with the top 10 grades of pass rusher and run defender, with Tavondre Sweat and Howard Cross being the other ones. He was the 4th most valuable D tackle in the nation. This corner wins above average metric as well. You mentioned the motor, man. The motor is relentless, ridiculous agility. And even if offensive lineman gets a clean shot on him, which is very rare considering how good his hand usage and agility and motor is, he still has really good power as well, man. And, I think the best way to put it, and you mentioned right there how he was like winning off the edge against Troy Fautano, a top 20 pick in the draft. The best way to put it is I was watching Mason Graham's tape when I first dove into him like a few months ago, and I was like, oh man, he looks undersized as hell. I wonder what he's listed at. He's 6'3", 318 pounds. He's got the prototypical size, and the only reason why I thought he was undersized was because he was moving way too damn well out there to not be an undersized player. Like, he reminded me, his movement ability reminded me like Howard Cross a little bit, and Cross is 285 at 6'1". So you got a guy who's 35 pounds heavier in Mason Graham, who's moving just as well as the guy who's our number 3 D tackle in the country, who's way undersized. So he's got the prototypical size. He's got everything you want in a defensive tackle. And I think, man, you mentioned Jalen Carter, Quentin Williams, those type of guys, like the best D tackles we've seen in college football in recent memory. I think with another dominant year, if he even improves, which I don't even know how he can, he will be in that range and could be a top 5 pick in the NFL draft. So this is really maybe the most impossible question I've ever asked of you, Dalton. But what is the improvement areas for Mason Graham heading into his junior year?
There's not many like on the field where the only thing I could think of, or there are moments in run defense where he kind of sells out with his quickness to try to really make a home run play. But even then, it's not very often. And with him, he's a guy I would just let him. I would almost just let him do what he wants. He's that good. No, honestly, you know what I want to see? I just want to see him play more. He was 167th in snaps played among defensive tackles, a little over 400. I don't think that's him. That's just Michigan likes to rotate their guys, and they're so darn deep, especially last year. But I think this year, Michigan's going to have to win games on defense. They lost most of their offensive pieces. I think the only thing I could honestly say is let's just see him do it at a snap count of like 600 or 650. But otherwise, like as far as the talent and what he does when he's on the field, I got almost nothing. Like he's that good a prospect. I think last year I kind of had Joe Alt as my safest pick in the draft. I think this year it might be Mason Graham.
I don't disagree with that either, man. We were actually, so before the 2024 draft, we were watching some tape with Trevor Sikkema because he was asking us, like, hey, who are the top guys in 2025 that I need to know? And we showed him Mason Graham. We showed him a bunch of other top guys. And he came away, he's like, I think Mason Graham's the best football player in the draft right now. So I'm really intrigued to see when the NFL Stock Exchange D Tackles episode drops and how they think of Mason Graham. But I could promise you that Trevor is going to love him, honestly, because just based off what he loved watching tape with us, man. So, yeah, I'm agree with you, man. That was the only thing I had written down too, was that the snap count at 474 last year, 348 the year before. We mentioned the motor and how unbelievable it is, and he does have an amazing motor. But I want to see, does that motor keep up, when he's playing 650 snaps, 700 snaps. Now, he did miss a couple games due to injury, missed the Nebraska and Rutgers games due to injury. So that probably plays a big part into a snap count. So it would have been close to 600 probably if he played in those 2 games. But at the same time, I want to see him play an increased snap count and see, can he maintain that absolute dominance that he showed? Because really, like you said, on field, there is not much to say about Mason Graham and ways for him to get better. I just want to see him do it on a more consistent snap count than what we saw from him as a true sophomore, which, again, is not really his fault either. But that's what we got for the best defensive tackle duo, and maybe the best duo in college football, Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant.